At our 10-year high school reunion, Matthew Thorne stood out painfully among a crowd of men who had already started to look greasy from weight gain and thinning hair. He was impossible to miss. Even though I deliberately chose the seat farthest from him, his gaze still snapped onto me like it was guided by radar. The moment our eyes collided, my heart skipped. The boyish face I remembered had sharpened into something angular and commanding, familiar, yet unsettlingly. 8 years. Meeting again like this happened too fast. I didn't even have time to put my mask back on. His eyes dropped to the plain band on my left ring finger. A calm, almost indifferent smile tugged at his lips. Married? Welcome, lovely, stay with me till the end, and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I like to imagine girls around the world sharing this warm, heart-fluttering moment together. I lowered my gaze and stayed silent. The people around us, however, exploded with noise. Looks like Matthew's the only one from our class still a golden bachelor. Oh please. I heard he's about to marry a senator's daughter. We should be congratulating him in advance. After a round of polite toasts and empty small talk, someone in the crowd, completely tone-deaf, suddenly said, Charlotte, if you two hadn't broken up back then, that rich wife spot would have been yours by now. Yeah, don't you regret it at all? The air froze for a few seconds. Every pair of eyes turned toward me like spotlights. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my chest and forced a casual smile. We were young and stupid back then. Dating was just, for fun. Matthew gently swirled the whiskey in his glass. The amber liquid caught the light, reflecting something cold. His gaze swept over me, his lips curling into a teasing half-smile. Since you're married, bring your husband next time. I'm curious what kind of man you're actually into. The mockery in his voice was unmistakable. I held back the embarrassment, unsure how to respond. After all, I was the one who dumped him back then, using the most pathetic excuse imaginable, you're not my type. Years had passed. I barely even dared to dream about him anymore. I had convinced myself that Matthew Thorne and I would remain like parallel lines for the rest of our lives, never crossing again. But the people around us were clearly enjoying the spectacle. So when did you get married, Charlotte? Why didn't you send out invitations? After graduation, I replied flatly. How come you never post your husband on Instagram? Keeping him hidden? Don't tell me he's too hard to look at to bring out. And wow, his financial strength doesn't seem great either. That wedding ring is pretty cheap. Under the table, my hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms until sharp pain shot through me. I took a deep breath and told a lie I had already repeated countless times. He works in Europe. Their faces lit up with that smug I knew something was off expression. Everyone knew how ugly things had gotten when Matthew and I broke up. He had waited downstairs outside my apartment for an entire day and night, begging for another chance. I never went down to see him. Now he had returned successful and powerful, like a loud slap in the face for my so-called bad eyesight back then. Of course they wanted to curry favor with him by stepping on me. I heard Matthew's group just acquired the company Charlotte works for, someone added. That means he's your boss now. Better behave yourself, Charlotte. That only made things louder. Manager Charlotte, shouldn't you toast your new boss? Amid the jeers and laughter, I had no choice but to stand up and pour myself a full glass of red wine. Before the alcohol even reached my stomach, my eyes were already burning. I tilted my head back and drank it all in one go. Mr. Thorne, I'll be counting on your guidance from here on out. Matthew let out a low, noncommittal chuckle. Of course, he said calmly. After all, Manager Charlotte and I share quite a history. He deliberately stressed that last word. His unfathomable eyes locked onto mine, and my chest tightened without warning. Excuse me, I said quickly. I need to use the restroom. I slipped out of the private room like a deserter fleeing the battlefield. In the restroom, icy water rushed over my hands. I lifted my head and stared at my reflection in the mirror, a 30-year-old woman with tired eyes and a carefully held-together expression. Honestly, Charlotte still has skin like a girl in her early 20s. Not having kids really keeps you young. The hushed voices of a few female classmates drifted from the next stall. Please. Who knows if she's even really married? 30 years old, no kids, never posts a husband, I bet she's some rich old guy's mistress. Designer bag from the current season, a decent car, and I heard she bought an apartment downtown. On her salary? There's no way she can afford all that alone. Then her sugar daddy must be pretty mid. If she hadn't been so stupid and dumped Matthew back then, she'd be living the high life by now. Oh come on. With her background, it's already a miracle she's made it this far. Do you really think the Thorne family would ever accept her? True. I still don't get how those two even ended up together. And she was the one who dumped him. She must regret it so badly her guts are turning inside out. I let out a bitter smile, dried my hands, and walked out of the restroom without a word. Did I regret it? I asked myself. Probably not. People have to learn how to say goodbye to things they can't hold on to. I had always known Matthew would end up where he was today. He had always been that shining presence. Whether at 18 or 30, he lived a life others could only envy. At 18, he was the wealthy quarterback, every girl's dream. At 30, he was the Ivy League elite returning in glory, the rising star of the business world. When everyone else was losing sleep over student loans, his parents had already paved a golden road to top schools for him. When I felt proud just for owning a small apartment in a crowded city and earning a somewhat respectable salary, he was already worth hundreds of millions, with properties scattered under his name. If 10 years ago Matthew was my earthly ideal, then now, he was my unattainable fantasy. I had never imagined we'd meet again. He had been overseas all these years, never once attending a reunion. I certainly never expected that the mysterious conglomerate acquiring our company would turn out to belong to him. An ex transforming overnight into my direct boss. I thought about the long list of bills I paid every month, mortgage, car loan, insurance, and forcibly swallowed the urge to draft a resignation letter. Forget it. I'd take it one step at a time. It had been 8 years since the breakup. Maybe he'd already moved on. I pulled out my phone and tried to call a ride. As I stepped out of the hotel, the winter wind cut across my face like a blade, sending a sharp chill straight to my forehead. I was about to stomp my feet to keep warm when my screen still read searching for drivers. Then a long black luxury sedan glided to a stop in front of the entrance. A uniformed driver stepped out, opened the rear door, and said respectfully, "Mr. Thorne." That was when I realized Matthew had appeared behind me without a sound. He wore a perfectly tailored bespoke suit that outlined his tall frame, radiating a cold, untouchable air of privilege that kept everyone at a distance. He glanced at me as if by accident, lifted his wrist to check a watch that was worth more than most people's annual salary, and spoke in a tone so flat it could have been meant for a stranger. "Get in. I'll give you a ride. It's hard to get a car around here." I waved my hands immediately. "Thank you, but no need. I've already called." "What, afraid I still can't let go of the past?" He cut me off smoothly. "Charlotte, it's been 8 years. Do you really think I'm that pathetic, to still be interested in a 30-year-old married woman? Or to lower myself to the point of wrecking someone else's marriage?" A cold smile curved his lips, but there was no warmth in his eyes at all. "Get in," he said lightly. "You can brief me on the company on the way. Refusing again would only make me look ridiculous." I slid stiffly into the back seat, which was spacious to the point of feeling excessive. Mr. Thorne," I began awkwardly, forcing myself into work mode. "I'm currently the manager of Project Division 2. The division consists of 3 teams, and we're planning to add a new group next quarter. Day-to-day operations are mainly handled by Frank." Matthew responded faintly, giving nothing away. Division 2 was established 3 years ago. We're currently ranked first in overall performance within the center, and next year we plan to. Still no reaction. He even closed his eyes. Tomorrow morning I'll send you a detailed work report by email, I added quietly. Matthew didn't respond. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating, as if the air inside the car had frozen solid. After a long while, he suddenly spoke. Last year's Employee Wellness Month initiative, was that your proposal? Yes. Another suffocating pause. I'm considering making some personnel adjustments across the company, he said casually. What does Manager Charlotte think? When a company gets acquired by a major group, it looks great on paper. For employees, though, it's always a mixed bag. Some are excited by the expanded opportunities. Others dread the rumors of restructuring and layoffs. A decision from leadership would naturally be made after thorough consideration and with the company's long-term interests in mind, I said, biting the bullet and delivering a perfectly safe, textbook answer. As employees, our role is to cooperate and execute. He turned his head slightly, his gaze deepening. Then he let out a soft, almost careless laugh. You really are different now. Even the way you talk has become so polished, so worldly. I suppressed the surge of emotion in my chest and replied coolly, people grow up. Mr. Thorne looks more mature these days as well. Heh. He turned to look out the window, eyes narrowing slightly. That low chuckle rippled through the tense space of the car, carrying an unmistakable note of mockery, like he was laughing at who I had become over the years. Yes. I had changed a lot. I had learned to walk in high heels with my head held high. Learned how to shine with confidence in the workplace. Learned how to flatter when necessary, and how to live behind a mask. I was no longer the girl who felt ashamed because she couldn't afford a pair of sneakers, no longer someone who wore her embarrassment plainly on her face. But that ambiguous laugh of Matthew's dragged me straight back into those years when I was humble to the point of dust, into the past I had tried so desperately to bury. I had never met my biological mother. From bits of gossip I overheard as a child, I learned that after giving birth to me, she decided this family was too poor. She ran away the moment she was discharged from the hospital. The man who could barely even be called my father didn't want me either. He tossed me to my grandmother like a piece of trash and ran off to chase women, drowning himself in gambling and alcohol. Later, buried under a mountain of loan shark debt, he took a desperate gamble, robbed a convenience store at gunpoint, got caught, and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. All these years, it was my grandmother who raised me, scraping by on government assistance and selling handmade crafts to keep us alive. Someone like me was born in the mud and grew up in it. Matthew was different. He belonged to the clouds. We were never meant to intersect. Cloud and dirt exist in entirely different worlds. The first time I ever met Matthew, I was 16. That day was trash collection day in the wealthy neighborhood. I followed my grandmother down the alley behind his mansion, the one with the swimming pool, picking up empty soda cans and cardboard boxes. I wore cheap canvas sneakers with the soles coming apart and an oversized hoodie 2 sizes too big, scurrying behind her like a frightened mouse. Matthew's mother was an elegant woman. When she saw us, she called up toward the second floor. Matthew, are there any unused boxes or plastic bottles left in the garage? Bring them down. He came out wearing a gray lounge tracksuit, his hair still wet, like he'd just finished swimming. Carrying a few boxes, he jogged toward us. Sunlight hit him just right, he looked exactly like the male lead in an American TV drama. He handed the boxes to me. I took them in a panic, my head bowed so low it nearly buried into my chest. When I caught sight of my filthy, worn-out shoes and my faded jeans, embarrassment burned so hard my ears turned red. Thank you. Wait here. There's more, I'll get it for you, he said suddenly, then turned and ran back inside. Matthew's mother seemed to sense my discomfort. She didn't pinch her nose at the sour smell on our clothes. Instead, keeping her distance, she smiled at me gently. Honey, study hard. Education is the only way to change your fate. Life will get better. My eyes stung instantly. Not long after, Matthew ran back out, his arms full of flattened cardboard and empty bottles. I was moved, but also humiliated to the core. And it was in that moment that I made a silent vow. I would study like my life depended on it. Even if I had to memorize everything by brute force, I would earn a full scholarship. I would climb out of this swamp, no matter what it took. I once imagined that maybe by the time I turned 30, I'd be living in a house like that, one with a lawn. Reality, of course, always slaps you hard enough to remind you how naive you were. Especially now, sitting in the back seat of Matthew's Rolls-Royce, staring up at the glittering starlight ceiling. I understood more clearly than ever that some gaps can never be bridged. We were both 30. I drove a second-hand Audi, he rode in a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce. I wore a Longines bought on sale, he wore a Patek Philippe. At 18, I had genuinely believed in the American dream. I believed that hard work could earn you anything. I didn't realize that some people are born at the finish line. You can struggle your entire life just to move from the slums to a working-class neighborhood. Meanwhile, someone else simply relocates, from a Manhattan Upper East Side townhouse to a beachfront estate in the Hamptons. Miss Green, we've arrived. The driver's voice pulled me back to reality. The car stopped in front of my apartment building. It was an older red brick structure, reasonably safe, but nowhere near anything you'd call luxurious. Thank you for the ride, Mr. Thorne. It's late, so I won't invite you upstairs, I said, putting on my professional smile as I offered a polite goodbye. What, Manager Charlotte has such strict manners at home? Matthew sneered lightly. Your husband set a curfew for you? I froze, caught off guard by the sharpness of the remark. With no good response, I could only reply softly, Goodbye, Mr. Thorne. The moment I opened the car door, the winter night rushed in, cold air pouring straight down my collar. Charlotte, Matthew said suddenly. His voice was low, rough, carried by the wind straight into my ear. These past years, have you been doing well? I don't know why, but that question, 8 years too late, nearly shattered every defense I'd built over the course of the day. I swallowed the ache rising in my throat, kept my back to him, and answered flatly. I'm doing fine. I reached out and pushed the car door fully open. I took a deep breath and stepped outside. Just as I was about to close it, I couldn't stop myself from turning back. Our eyes collided in the dim interior of the car, and my heart skipped violently. Does he treat you well? Matthew asked. His voice sounded rough, almost strained. He does. That's good. I forced down the ache in my chest and turned to leave. In my haste, I nearly twisted my ankle in my heels. Charlotte, his voice came again from behind me. Aren't you going to ask how I've been all these years? Ignoring the soreness in my ankle, I slowly turned back. Under the yellow glow of the streetlight, Matthew's face looked strikingly deep, half-lit and half-shadowed. This face, one I had seen countless times in my dreams. A phrase suddenly surfaced in my mind, one look, a lifetime. Matthew, then how have you been these past years? I asked quietly. Standing against the light, he gave a self-mocking smile. Good. And not good. His dark eyes locked onto mine, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. I'm getting engaged. Will you congratulate me? Of course, congratulations on your engagement. May you grow old together, I said, putting on a perfectly calm act, even forcing a smile. Matthew, then I wish both of us a graceful ending. A thin mist blurred my vision, and his figure against the light grew increasingly indistinct. The moment I turned and stepped into the apartment lobby, my emotions finally collapsed. 8 years. I truly thought I had let it go. So why was I still this fragile? If I had known reunion would hurt this much, should I never have met him at all? That short stretch of youth, was it a reward God gave me, or a punishment? That unfinished high school romance. So intense. So brief. So full of regret. Senior year, a transfer student joined our class. When he stood at the podium introducing himself, whispers rippled through the room. The girls were murmuring that the new guy was ridiculously hot. I sneaked a glance up. He seemed a little taller than when I'd seen him 2 years earlier in the alley behind his house, his shoulders broader too. In AP English Literature, Mr. Henderson asked where he wanted to sit. Matthew scanned the room, then pointed to the empty seat beside me. I'd like to sit there. It looks quiet. Good for studying. And just like that, he became my desk mate. I didn't feel happy. I felt nervous, embarrassed, almost scared. I was afraid he'd recognize me. Afraid he'd remember I was the girl who used to dig through trash behind his house. Hi. I'm Matthew. Nice to meet you, neighbor, he said brightly, extending his hand once he sat down. Hi. I'm Charlotte. My voice was so soft it was barely audible. Lottie, he teased with a grin. That shy, huh? I ducked my head, pretending to straighten my textbooks. Just call me Charlotte. All right, Lottie. From that day on, he always called me Lottie. Lottie, what do you usually do on weekends? Lottie, the cafeteria pizza today tastes like rubber, want my sandwich? Lottie, how is your brain wired? How do you even get full marks in calculus? Most of the time, he was the one talking nonstop while I kept my head down doing problems, replying with the occasional one-word answer. Matthew was outgoing and polite to everyone. With his Hollywood-level looks and privileged background, he quickly became one of the most talked-about guys in school. The football team wanted him. The debate club wanted him. And the cheerleaders watched him like hawks. I was invisible. He was the brightest source of light beside me. Many girls didn't dare approach him directly, so they asked me to pass along love letters or party invitations. Shy and painfully insecure, I had to work myself up for ages just to hand him those pink envelopes. My hands would shake, as if I were the one confessing. Matthew, this is from Liz. He didn't even glance at it before stuffing it into his backpack. But I already like someone, he said casually. Ugh, when is the person I like ever going to write me a love letter? He let out an exaggerated sigh on purpose. Then he suddenly turned, those beautiful eyes fixing on me. Lottie, if you were writing a love letter to someone you liked, what would you write? My face burned instantly. I bit my lip, hesitated for a long moment, and finally mumbled in a tiny voice, I still have exams to prepare for. I don't have time to think about that. He burst out laughing. Then wait until you get your offer, he said brightly. He looked so happy, then couldn't help poking my arm. Lottie, why do you blush so easily? Do you have someone you like? I could only pretend to lower my head and read The Great Gatsby, while my heart raced so fast it felt like it was about to leap out of my throat. And no. I don't. That night, lying on my narrow twin bed, I thought about that question for a long time. If I were to confess to the person I liked, what would I write in a love letter? I thought of Jane Eyre. Do you think because I am poor, obscure, plain, and little, I am soulless and heartless? You think wrong. I have as much soul as you, and full as much heart. I am speaking to you now on equal terms, as if we had passed through the grave and stood at God's feet, equal, as we are. What I wanted was never charity, the kind where Cinderella is rescued by a prince. What I wanted was a love between equals. Two independent souls standing side by side, neither above nor beneath the other, meeting each other with dignity and depth. Back then, I was still trapped in the mud of my family background, so small I might as well have been dust on the ground. Poverty, timidity, and inferiority pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. I wore a pair of discounted canvas sneakers I'd found at Goodwill for 2 full years. They were size 6. My feet were size 7. When the soles came apart, I glued them back together. When the fabric yellowed, I secretly painted it white with correction fluid. Every time I passed the Foot Locker display window, I slowed down and stole glances at the latest pair of Nike running shoes. Even the most basic model cost $90. With tax, that meant my grandmother would have to collect bottles for a long time, weave for many long nights, or I'd have to skip countless lunches. My grandmother had arthritis. Every time I saw her bending over trash bins, bracing her aching back, or sitting on a tiny stool under dim light, carefully weaving with swollen fingers, I would force myself to crush that tiny, pitiful desire. Until one day, I watched a well-dressed mother buy those shoes for her daughter. She knelt down gently, helped her daughter put them on, pressed the toe, and asked softly, "Honey, do they feel tight?" I wondered, if I had a mother, would she treat me like that too? But that was just a fantasy. In PE class, the coach required everyone to wear proper athletic shoes inside the gym to avoid scratching the floor. I was the only one who didn't meet the standard. He looked at the canvas shoes wrapped in tape on my feet, frowned, and shouted in front of the entire class. "Miss Green, how many times have I told you? Those shoes are not safe. How are you supposed to run in those? Are you trying to break your leg or ruin my floor?" Surrounded by laughter and pity, I lowered my head as far as it could go, wishing I could disappear into a crack in the ground. I could only lie and say I'd forgotten to bring the right shoes. Then one afternoon after school, Matthew suddenly jumped out from behind me. He was carrying a large shopping bag and shouted loudly, "Lottie, happy birthday!" The glow of the setting sun fell over him. He smiled wide, showing his teeth, strands of light hair dancing in the evening breeze. "Surprise! I secretly checked your student file, I knew today was your birthday." I froze in place, stunned, completely at a loss for what to do. "Here, your birthday present." He shoved the shopping bag into my hands. A well-known sports brand logo was printed on the front. "Don't look at me like that. It was free, buy one, get one. The mall was running a promo." He lifted his foot slightly. On his feet was a brand new pair of black, limited edition sneakers. I opened the box in my hands. Inside was the same model, in white. I knew this pair. It was the hottest release of the season, reselling for hundreds of dollars even second-hand. "Thank you, but... Matthew, this is too much. I really can't accept it." My hands felt like they'd been burned. I tried to push the bag back toward him. "What? You don't like freebies?" He raised an eyebrow. "And no, that's not it, it's just really expensive," I stammered, my face turning bright red. "I told you, I didn't pay for it. Look." He even pulled out a receipt, clearly doctored or cut off, and pointed proudly at the line that read $0.00. "I'm sorry. I really can't take it." I was still refusing when he finally got a little impatient. "Charlotte, we've been desk mates for so long. Do you not even consider me a friend?" "No, that's not." Seeing that I was on the verge of tears, his tone softened immediately. He switched to an almost pleading expression. "This isn't for nothing," he said. "Think of it as my tuition fee. I have to retake AP Calculus," he continued quickly. "And you know how bad my math is. If I fail again, my mom's going to ground me for real. Help me out, okay? Top student?" When I kept my head down in silence, he hovered around me like an oversized golden retriever. "Please, Lottie. A private tutor outside costs $100 an hour. If anything, I'm the one getting the better deal." I didn't know how to handle this kind of kindness. He cut me off decisively. "All right, it's settled. Decision made." That day, he reached out and ruffled my hair. The gesture was so gentle, like he was calming a stray cat. "Lottie," he said softly, "everything's going to be okay." It reminded me of 2 years earlier, in the alley behind his house, how his mother had offered me the same warmth, even from a distance. They were both good people. They saw straight through my embarrassment, yet handled my fragile, almost laughable pride with such care. That evening, Matthew stood beneath a sky blazing with sunset colors, backlit by the glow, looking like he was made of light. I walked ahead with my worn-out backpack, while he faced me, walking backward. "Cinderella becomes a princess once she puts on the glass slipper," he said. "Lottie, someday I'll give you a real pair of glass shoes." After that, I tutored Matthew in calculus for an hour every day after school. He was actually very smart, quick-minded. He just hadn't bothered to apply himself before. It was also then that I truly understood how uneven this world was. While we were stressing over SAT scores and scholarship applications, his parents had already arranged alumni interviews at Ivy League schools for him. I heard that tuition plus living expenses there ran $70,000 to $80,000 a year. To me, that number was beyond imagination. Because that same winter, I nearly broke down in front of the entire class over a few $100s in senior dues. That year, the school announced the required senior expenses, graduation gown rental, the yearbook, and prom tickets. Altogether, $300. We simply didn't have that kind of money. My grandmother didn't sleep all night from worry. That amount was our entire food budget for a month. I worked up the courage to find the teacher in charge after class and asked if there was any way to apply for a waiver, or at least pay only the bare minimum for the diploma. She was a kind person, but her approach was painfully misguided. During homeroom, she openly suggested starting a mutual aid fund for students like Charlotte, those with financial difficulties. $5 bills. $10 bills. One by one, my classmates pulled money from their pockets and dropped it into the donation box. The way they looked at me was full of pity, and worse, a faint sense of superiority. I stood by the podium, feeling as if I'd been stripped naked and put on display. That feeling, of having your dignity ground under someone else's heel, is almost impossible to describe. In the end, it was Matthew who stormed up to the front of the classroom, grabbed the donation box, and dumped everything out. He shoved the money back into people's hands. Take it back. Who needs your damn charity? Then he pulled out his checkbook, scribbled furiously, and slapped a check onto the teacher's desk, covering every last fee for me. That was the first time Matthew ever lost his temper at school. And it was for me. After class, he cornered me by the lockers, eyes blazing with anger. Charlotte, if you were short on money, why didn't you tell me? I didn't know how to explain. I didn't want his pity. I didn't want to be his charity case. I wanted, at the very least, for us to be equal in spirit. I took a deep breath and said quietly, I'll pay you back as soon as I can. Thank you, Matthew. That winter break, I found a part-time job at a dry cleaning factory. The conditions were brutal. It processed hospital linens and factory uniforms, and the air was thick with harsh chemical fumes. The workers said that if you stayed too long, your lungs would give out, but the hourly wage was a few dollars higher than McDonald's. So I stood there 8 hours a day, breathing in that stinging steam, trading my health for money. After winter break, I finally returned the $300 to Matthew. He stared at the crumpled stack of cash in my hands, his expression frighteningly cold. Charlotte, he said, you really can't stand owing me anything. Not even a little? I'd prepared so many things to say. But in that moment, all of them collapsed into a single word. Yes. After that incident, rumors about us spread all over school. People said Matthew was my sugar daddy. That I was playing the victim to gain sympathy. I started keeping my distance from him. He seemed to be holding back anger too, and stopped seeking me out. Then one day, a football player who sat behind me decided to pull a prank. He snapped my bra strap hard, pop, a sharp sound that echoed through the room. The class erupted in laughter. I wanted to disappear. The boy chewed his gum casually and said, Relax. It's just a joke. Can't you take a joke? That was when Matthew finally exploded. He charged over like a furious lion and slammed his fist straight into the boy's face. Are you close to her? He shouted. Who the hell do you think you are, making jokes like that? If I ripped your pants off in front of everyone, he went on, voice shaking with rage, would that count as a joke too? That was the first time I ever saw Matthew completely lose control. In the end, both of them were called in with their parents, and both were suspended. It was also that day that Matthew's mother came to find me. She asked to meet at a cafe near the school. She was still as beautiful and elegant as ever, ordering an expensive coffee whose name I didn't even recognize. So you're Matthew's desk mate, she said gently. Charlotte, Matthew has suddenly been arguing with us at home. He says he doesn't want to go to college on the East Coast anymore, he wants to stay here and attend a state school instead. Do you know why? I lowered my head in silence, fingers twisting the hem of my clothes. Affection should help people grow, she said softly, not make someone give up their future. Honey, you're a smart girl. Help me talk some sense into him. He belongs to a much wider sky. I hesitated for a long time. Then one afternoon, I finally gathered the courage to go find Matthew myself. Matthew, I said, forcing the words out, you should go to Boston. He looked surprised, a flicker of hurt passing through his eyes. Charlotte, do you really want me to go? I couldn't bring myself to meet his gaze. I clenched my teeth and told a lie that went against my heart. Yeah, go see the world for me. Everything churning inside me, every fear, every longing, collapsed into just a few simple words. And I'll work hard too. I wanted to be the oak standing beside you, not the vine clinging to you. If we each worked hard in our own way, maybe one day we could meet again at the summit. All right. I promise. He looked at me deeply, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. But we stay the same as before. No more avoiding me. Okay. He lifted a hand and ruffled my hair, just like he always had. Lottie, everything's going to be okay. We were both too young then. We believed that as long as we loved each other, distance and time didn't matter. That if we tried hard enough, we could fill the gaps carved by class and fate. We didn't know that fate had already put a price tag on everything. After that, my relationship with Matthew seemed to grow closer. He loved talking to me about everything, NBA games, Marvel movies, the countries he wanted to visit. Most of the time he did the talking, and I listened. Every now and then, when I turned my head and caught his openly intense gaze, I'd instinctively look away. He would let out a soft laugh, and I'd blush and whisper, "Pay attention in class, Matthew." Because we were so close, all my most embarrassing moments were inevitably witnessed by him. Once, during my period, I didn't realize I'd stained my pants. When the final bell rang and I stood up, he suddenly took off the varsity hoodie tied around his waist and wrapped it around mine, knotting the sleeves in front without asking. "Don't move. Keep it on," he said quietly. When it finally hit me what he'd done, I was so mortified I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. He told me to stay put in an empty classroom, then ran off to a nearby CVS. When he came back, his arms were full of feminine hygiene products. There are way too many brands," he said, scratching his messy blonde hair, the tips of his ears slightly red. "Long ones, short ones, wings, no wings. I didn't know which you use, so I just bought a bit of everything." When I hesitated to take them, he reached out and ruffled my hair again, his voice impossibly gentle. "It's just your period. Totally normal for girls. You don't need to feel embarrassed, Lottie." Then, like a magician, he pulled out a steaming cup of hot chocolate from behind his back. "I read online that girls should have something warm and sweet at times like this." He pressed the cup into my hands. It was the signature drink from the cafe across the street from school. "Lottie, do you know that hot chocolate slogan?" he asked, tilting his head, mischief sparkling in his eyes. I murmured, "No." He laughed at me. "Top student who aced AP English doesn't even know that." I didn't answer him. But I did know. The commercial had been playing non-stop on TV back then. The male lead said, "You're my hot chocolate, so I can hold you carefully in my hands." That afternoon, the setting sun painted the field in gold. Matthew stood by the bleachers, chin lifted, and said to me, "Lottie, I'll sing you a song. Help lift your mood." He looked straight into my eyes, strumming an imaginary guitar, softly humming a melody. The lyrics were about rain clearing, about longing. I had been walking alone under gray skies for so long. In that moment, I suddenly saw my sunshine. "Was it good?" he asked. "It was," I said. Matthew waved his hand smugly. "That was just me messing around." One day, I'll show you the real deal. As graduation drew closer, the countdown to goodbye began. At the senior talent show, Matthew appeared on stage in a formal black suit, seated at a grand piano under the spotlight. He played and sang an original song of his own. He called it Sunny Day. Once upon a time, there was someone who loved you for so long. But the wind slowly blew the distance farther and farther away. Just when we finally had one more day to love. At the end of the story, you still seem to say goodbye. The story ends with goodbye, but some goodbyes are meant to be said with a smile. Applause and screams rose in waves from the audience. Girls were calling his name. I sat quietly in the darkness of the crowd. Matthew turned his head toward the audience, and as if guided by instinct, his gaze cut straight through the sea of people and found me. Our eyes met. No words needed. He lifted the corner of his mouth and gave me that smile, one meant only for me. My face stayed calm, but my heart pounded like a drum. Years later, I would finally understand that what he felt in that moment had a name. It was falling in love. That summer, when we exchanged yearbooks, I wrote something on the last page of Matthew's. Not the usual "have a great summer," but a line adapted from a poem about oak trees and kapok trees. If I love you, I will never cling like a trumpet vine, borrowing your height to show off. I must be a kapok tree standing beside you, rooted close, equal in form. What I wanted was a love of equals, never dependence. He helped me set up a new email account. The password was MNC plus his birthday. He said he was afraid I'd forget him one day, so he wanted his name and birthday embedded in my password. Later on, many of my accounts used the same pattern. I heard his passwords changed too. It became our unspoken secret. On graduation night, after prom, there was an after party. I didn't go. The ticket cost $100, and I'd need a dress too. I couldn't justify it. When Matthew found me, I had just gotten off work at the dry cleaning factory that reeked of chemicals. There was no choice. College deposits were expensive. I had to save every dollar. He told me he'd be flying to Boston in a few days. I stayed silent for a long time before finally saying, "Have a safe trip." He laughed helplessly. "Lottie, that goodbye sounds way too official." I'm sorry." He smiled and rubbed my head, messing up my hair. "It's okay. There'll be plenty of chances in the future. You're so smart, you'll definitely be a Wall Street powerhouse someday." He was always so careful, so protective, when it came to my hopes for the future. I reached into the pocket of my work pants and pulled out a small charm I'd been carrying around for days. It was a little bear woven from leather. I'd learned the technique from my grandmother, working on it bit by bit every night during breaks. I didn't know how to give expensive gifts. This was all I had. Cheap. Ordinary. "I made this for you. I hope you don't mind." "You made it yourself?" Matthew's eyes lit up with genuine delight. I nodded shyly. "This is amazing. It's a one-of-a-kind limited edition," he said earnestly. "I'm going to hang it on my car keys and look at it every day." What I never told Matthew was this. That woven leather bear came as a pair. The other one stayed with me. In the end, Matthew opened his arms and said, "Come here, Charlotte. Let's have a hug." I breathed in the scent clinging to him, a mix of sunlight and expensive cologne, and thought of that song, Sunny Day. He held me tightly and whispered into my ear, "Lottie, everything's going to be okay." After that, we went our separate ways. Each of us ran toward our own world, living on opposite ends of the map, seemingly fine. Sometimes I think, if only the story had ended there. Friends, but not quite lovers. A quiet crush never spoken out loud. The most intimate thing we ever did was that one hug before parting. No later hysteria. No dramatic rupture. Just memories softened by time, sweet with a filter. Then, years later, when I was 30 and ran into Matthew again, he would tell me he was getting engaged. I'd smile like an old friend, give him a generous hug, and say, "Matthew, congratulations. Thanks for taking care of me back then. I've got a little money now, let me give you a proper gift. Maybe I'd even joke. Hey, old classmate. You know, I had a crush on you once. Instead of what actually happened. Instead of me pretending to be cheerful and casual, wishing him a lifetime of happiness, then turning around, hiding in the stairwell, and crying like a stray dog. Crying it all out. Wiping my tears in silence. Telling myself, it's fine. Take 2 melatonin tonight, go to bed early. You've got an early meeting tomorrow. Put the mask back on. Step out of the elevator. Walk into the apartment that's supposed to be called home. Why are you only back now? Do you have any idea your old man's been waiting here for hours? Someone was squatting by my apartment door. Joe Green. My biological father. A year ago, my parole officer contacted me to say he'd completed his sentence and been released. The word father, I'd only ever seen it on American TV, usually paired with baseball gloves and weekend barbecues. But not all fathers are like that. I'd seen him only a handful of times in my entire life. When I was little, the neighbors said my mother had run off, and my father spent his days in casinos and bars. He only came home when he ran out of money. Debt collectors splashed red paint on our door. He stole the lunch money my grandmother saved for me and cursed me as a useless burden. Later, he went to prison for armed robbery. I used to think 15 years in a federal prison might change a man. But some people are rotten to the core. They don't get better. Ever. He harassed me endlessly. Calling the police didn't help, he always skirted the edges of the law. And in this state, because of certain complicated legal clauses, I seemed unable to fully shake off some twisted responsibility tied to him. I found that woman, he said, blocking the doorway like a thug. She says she wants 50 grand before she'll let your brother acknowledge me. Give me 50,000. He reeked of cheap cigarettes and stale alcohol. Why should I give you money? 50,000? Have you ever spent $5 on me? Because I'm your father. Because your last name is Green, he barked. If I hadn't brought you into this world, would you have what you have now? Would you be driving an Audi? I'm old now. My back hurts, my legs hurt. I can't work anymore. Give me the money. I promise I won't bother you for at least 6 months. I don't have money. And even if I did, I wouldn't give it to you to gamble away. Fine. My dignity isn't worth much anyway, he sneered. If you don't mind being embarrassed, I'll stay right here. I'll knock on every door on this floor and tell them what kind of cold-blooded daughter you are. Over and over again. Like a leech I couldn't shake off. This messy, miserable life, sometimes it drives me right to the edge of insanity. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and shut that man out on the other side of the door. A white cat limped over, brushing against my calf. I picked her up and stroked her soft fur, feeling the vibration of her purring rumble against my chest. Her name is January. I found her 6 years ago, on January 1st. Back then, she was covered in skin disease, one of her hind legs broken by someone, curled up beside the trash bins under my apartment building, barely clinging to life. It was New Year's night, snow falling heavily, and she was shivering uncontrollably from the cold. You're drifting too, huh? I whispered to her then. How about we stick together? That way, neither of us will be unwanted kids anymore. I maxed out my credit cards to get her treated. It took a long time, but she finally recovered. Over the years she's grown rounder and healthier, though that leg still limps from the old injury. Every night, no matter how late I come home from work, January hobbles over, meowing to greet me. When I fall asleep listening to her purr, no matter how much scheming I've endured at the office that day, no matter how much humiliation I've faced at my own door, I feel healed. She's been with me through everything, from a leaking basement apartment to this small place I call home now, from the cheapest dry kibble to imported canned food. We've depended on each other, step by step, building our lives together. Until Matthew showed up, and shattered that fragile calm. People say a new boss always lights 3 fires. After Matthew took over, his first fire was aimed straight at the bloated administrative department. Sweeping layoffs plunged the entire company into panic. Yet under that high-pressure atmosphere, office gossip spread faster than a virus. "Hey, don't you think Mr. Thorne is basically walking testosterone? Cold face, but that elite vibe is insane. Don't even think about it. Haven't you read the Wall Street Journal? He's back for a strategic marriage. I heard he likes girls with short hair and big eyes, like those vintage Hollywood sweethearts." The very next day, several female colleagues showed up with fresh pixie cuts or sleek bobs. Short-haired white moonlight types? I subconsciously touched my own long hair. I'd only worn a clumsy short cut once, when I was 16. After that, I couldn't afford regular trims, so I just kept letting it grow. Who knew who he'd met in the Ivy League years, someone who dazzled his youth. "Manager Charlotte, please come to the front desk right now." The HR manager's voice was shaking on the phone. "There's a man in the lobby claiming to be your father. He's causing a scene." I dropped the phone and sprinted toward the elevator. A crowd had already gathered in the lobby. Several people were filming on TikTok. Joe Green sat on the marble floor like a banished vagrant, crying dramatically as he put on a pitiful performance. "My daughter Charlotte, I raised her with my own blood and sweat. Sent her to college," he wailed. "Now she sits in an office making big money and won't even care if her own father lives or dies. She carries designer bags every day, eats Michelin food, but won't spare a single dollar for her sick father's medical bills," he cried. "Everyone, tell me, is that something a human being does?" Whispers rippled through the crowd. I never thought Charlotte would be so heartless behind the scenes. "Yeah. I mean, that is her dad. He looks really pitiful." My direct supervisor, Frank, spotted me and immediately dumped the problem on me. "Charlotte, look at this mess," he snapped. "This is the company's front door. How are we supposed to do business with this going on? Handle it. Now." Every pair of eyes felt like needles piercing into me. The sensation yanked me straight back to that high school gym, the afternoon I stood there in worn-out shoes, surrounded and stared at. I was 30 years old. I thought I'd escaped this kind of humiliation. I hadn't. Worse still, it was happening in front of the one person I least wanted to see. "Frank," Matthew's cold voice cut through the crowd, "is everyone here so free? Have all your KPIs for the quarter already been met?" Frank jolted like he'd been electrocuted and immediately started shooing people away. With his audience gone, Joe Green looked momentarily lost, then raised his voice even louder, cursing, "Charlotte, you ungrateful bitch. I'll sit right here and not move an inch, let your big boss see exactly what kind of person you are." I clenched my teeth. My fingers wouldn't stop shaking. Heh. I had no idea Manager Charlotte had such an enthusiastic father, Matthew said coolly, looking down at Joe from the second-floor railing. His gaze was the kind you'd reserve for a cockroach. "Why you, who are you?" Joe froze. "I'm the owner here. If you have something to say it to me." Matthew tilted his head slightly toward the head of security behind him. "Take him to a meeting room. Call legal. And while you're at it, check whether his parole record shows any violations." He didn't spare me a single glance as he turned toward his office. "You stay outside. Don't follow." 20 minutes later, Joe Green was escorted out like a defeated rooster. He clutched a check in his hand, his face a mix of greed and fear. I didn't believe for a second he'd give up so easily, unless Matthew had used something far from ordinary methods. How much did he ask for?" I asked, standing on the expensive Persian rug in the CEO's office, my face burning. "Mr. Thorne, I'll transfer the money to you." "It's handled," Matthew said without looking up, continuing to review documents behind his massive desk. "If he comes within 500 feet of this building again, his parole officer will immediately receive a request to revoke parole." "Thank you, Mr. Thorne." "Thank you?" He finally looked up, lazily twirling the pen in his fingers, studying me. And how does manager Charlotte plan to thank me? A formal thank you letter? I lowered my gaze. Anything within my ability. In that case, he said lightly, you'll handle my engagement party. I expect you won't disappoint me. I snapped my head up. But I've never planned a wedding or an engagement event. That's usually handled by admin or PR. You managed an employee wellness month for several thousand people, he cut in. This is just a few hundred guests. A cruel smile curved his lips. Besides, my preferences are something manager Charlotte knows best, aren't they? I trust you the most. All right, I heard my own voice, dry and hollow. This was his revenge. And his test. The next day, I met Matthew's fiancée. Clara Beaumont. A senator's daughter. A Wharton graduate. Young, beautiful, impeccably connected. Standing beside Matthew, they looked like a perfect Barbie and Ken set brought to life. Hi. You must be Charlotte, right? I'm Clara. She reached out to shake my hand, her smile bright and unshadowed, her energy warm and open, like California sunshine. Miss Beaumont, hello. I'll be handling the planning for your engagement party with Mr. Thorne. Oh, please, just call me Clara, she said cheerfully. And could you help me get some water? Matthew insisted on dragging me here to talk about schedules, I'm dying of thirst. She puffed out her cheeks and shot Matthew a playful, spoiled glare. Of course. One moment, I replied, turning toward the pantry. Before I could take 2 steps, Matthew's cool voice sounded behind me. Jessica, bring in 2 glasses of water. He was speaking to his executive assistant at the door, as if pouring water was beneath me. Or perhaps he simply didn't want me doing it. Either way, the message was clear. Clara's eyes flicked sideways. She stole a glance at Matthew, then flashed a playful, knowing smile. Miss Beaumont, I said, opening my notebook and slipping back into work mode, do you have any specific preferences for the party theme or flow? Clara pointed at herself. Me? I don't really care. As long as there's alcohol and music, I'm good. I paused, then looked toward Matthew. And Mr. Thorne? Do you have any requirements? Matthew leaned back in his chair. Through the lenses of his glasses, his deep-set eyes fixed on me, half smiling, half not. The venue should be covered in white camellias, he said casually. For the opening music, let's use the piano version of Sunny Day. What do you think? It felt like someone squeezed my heart hard. Back then, he had once told me our wedding would be filled with camellias, because that was the flower on that Chanel bag. He said it would be proof of our luxurious love. He'd also said he would sing Sunny Day for me again at our wedding. He remembered everything. Only the female lead had changed. I swallowed the pain burning in my chest and replied hoarsely, it's a great concept. I'll take care of it. Good. You two can discuss the rest, he said, glancing at his watch as he stood up. I have a cross-border meeting. As he passed by me on his way out, a cold draft seemed to follow him. TSK, what a weird man, Clara muttered under her breath, watching his back. Then she turned to me with a grin. Charlotte, don't mind him. Come on, have lunch with me. I'm starving. 10 minutes later, Clara's Porsche pulled up in front of a rundown taco truck in Queens. This? Miss Beaumont, I hesitated, are you sure you want to eat this? Call me Clara, she said immediately. The burrito tacos here are the best in all of New York. I've been craving them like crazy. She sat down on a plastic stool by the roadside, biting into the greasy taco with zero pretension, not a trace of a senator's daughter demeanor. I thought someone like you would only eat Michelin food or organic salads, I laughed. Please, she rolled her eyes. Those so-called healthy meals taste like grass. I used to sneak out all the time to eat this behind my family's back. She wiped the sauce from the corner of her mouth, then suddenly looked straight at me. Charlotte, do you think I'm some pitiful girl sacrificing love for family interests? That's your private matter. This is a merger, she shrugged. Not just of companies, but of families. I don't like Matthew, and he doesn't like me. We're partners. If you don't like each other, why get married? Because it makes sense, she said calmly. Family background, education, assets, it's a textbook match. Then she leaned closer, eyes sparkling with mischief. I'll tell you a secret. I actually like someone else. I looked at her in surprise. He's a bad boy, she continued. Dropped out of high school. Fixes motorcycles. Did time in prison. I stared at her, stunned. You see, she said with a bitter smile, finishing the last of her soda, I'm so perfect, I should be good enough for him, right? But he thinks he's a rat in the gutter and I'm the moon in the sky. He refuses to accept me. And now he has to watch me get engaged to someone else. In that moment, I saw my former self in this girl who'd been born with a silver spoon. In the adult world, love and marriage are often two completely different things. Ugh, thinking about that asshole ruins my mood, Clara said suddenly. Charlotte, come drink with me tonight. Matthew's on a business trip anyway, no one's controlling me. Before I could even refuse, she dragged me straight into the car. She took me to a members-only nightclub in the meatpacking district. I know this place, she shouted over the music. Manager, give me the best booth. And you, and you. That whole row, all of you, come over and pour the drinks. Under the pounding electronic beat, Clara completely let loose. She pointed at a line of handsome bottle service guys nearby and, without blinking, ordered 3 bottles. Charlotte, she slung an arm around my shoulders, eyes glassy with drink. Pick one you like. Any of them. My scalp went numb. I was way out of my depth. Clara, let's go back, okay? No way. Tonight we drink till we drop. She downed champagne glass after glass, quickly crossing into full-blown drunk. She started crying, shouting the biker guy's name, calling him a coward between sobs. With no other choice, I picked up her phone, flipping through her contacts to find someone, anyone, to come get her. Before I could dial, a tall man in a leather jacket suddenly appeared beside the booth. His arms were covered in tattoos. His expression was dark, his presence intimidating in a way that made the air tighten instantly. He frowned at Clara's drunken state, said nothing, and hoisted her onto his shoulder with one arm. Clara pounded his back, calling him an asshole, her voice slurring. I'm her brother, the man said curtly, then shot a warning glance at the row of summoned guys. Take care of the rest of the guests. The bottle service guys answered in unison, got it. Me, okay. So that must be the legendary ex-con motorcycle guy. Charlotte, let me toast you. Hey, beautiful, why are you sitting so far away? With the sponsor gone, a few of the guys drifted toward me. I panicked, grabbed my bag, and was just about to stand. Pretty bold, aren't you? Ordering 10 at once? That familiar, icy voice cut through the deafening music right above my head. Matthew had appeared beside the booth without warning. One hand in his pocket, his tie loosened and hanging crooked around his neck, his expression amused and dangerous. My heart lurched. Clara. Clara was taken home by her brother. Please don't tell me he thinks those 10 guys were mine. Matthew didn't bother responding. He stepped over the table in one smooth motion, grabbed my wrist, and yanked me up from the couch, dragging me straight into the adjacent VIP corridor. It was quieter there. The lighting was dim, intimate. My back slammed hard into the wall, pain flashing through me. Matthew closed in immediately, bracing both hands beside my head, caging me in his space. That wasn't her brother, he said lowly. That was her ex. He dipped his head, hot breath brushing the side of my neck, carrying the faint scent of tobacco and whiskey. So what, my fiancé runs off to see her old flame, and you, the ex-girlfriend, can't stand being lonely either. Charlotte, he murmured, voice rough, is your husband in Europe not enough for you? Want me to help? The anger in his eyes tangled with something darker, something he'd been holding down for far too long. It scared me. And yet, my heart betrayed me, pounding hard. His body pressed close, that aggressive masculine presence suffocating, overwhelming. "Mr. Thorne, have some respect," I said, forcing my voice steady. "I'm married." I tried to push against his solid chest. He didn't budge, unyielding as stone. "Married?" Matthew let out a short, mocking laugh. His gaze dropped to my left hand. He grabbed it, lifted it between us, eyes locked on the plain band on my finger. "With this?" His voice turned sharp. "If he really loved you, why didn't he even bother buying you a proper diamond ring?" "He's in Europe?" His lips curled. "Or is that just a story you made up to keep the trash at bay?" "This is my private business," I snapped, finally losing my composure. I struggled with all my strength to wrench my hand free, my voice rising despite myself. "Let go, Matthew." "And if I don't?" Something in him seemed to short-circuit in that instant. He lowered his head abruptly, his lips hovering just millimeters from mine, a dangerously intimate distance. "Charlotte, admit it. You still love me. Just like I still hate you." Then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was a punishing, consuming kiss, filled with anger, despair, and 8 years of desire crushed down and sealed away. My mind went blank. For a split second, instinct urged me to respond. My body recognized him, the familiarity was etched into my bones. But clarity slammed back just as fast. I was the one who'd walked away for pride. I didn't deserve to fall back into him. MMPH. I struggled desperately and, in a moment of ruthless resolve, bit down hard on his lower lip. The metallic taste of blood spread across my mouth. Matthew froze from the pain for a single heartbeat. I seized the chance, shoved him away with everything I had, and before I could stop myself, my hand flew up. Smack. The sound echoed sharply down the narrow corridor. The air went dead. Matthew stood there, head turned to the side. He pressed his tongue against his cheek where I'd hit him. The red fury in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by something far deeper, an emptiness that seemed to swallow all light. I sagged against the wall, chest heaving. I wiped my mouth hard with the back of my hand, tears spilling despite my efforts to hold them back. "Don't touch me," my voice broke. "Matthew, don't make me hate you." He turned back toward me. When he saw my tear-streaked face, his rigid shoulders collapsed all at once. He lifted a hand as if to wipe my tears away, but stopped halfway. In the end, his arm fell limply to his side. "Charlotte," he asked hoarsely, his voice like it was scraped raw with gravel. "What am I to you, really? Wasn't I good enough to you? Why did you treat me like that? How could you turn around and marry someone else so easily? Tell me, what does he have that I don't?" I stared at the man in front of me. Once so proud, so untouchable. Now he looked like a child who'd been abandoned, demanding answers he was afraid to hear. Two voices fought inside me. One whispered, "Tell him the truth. Tell him you never stopped loving him. Tell him about the sacrifices, the fear, the impossible choices." The other voice was cold and merciless. "Charlotte, look at yourself. Drowning in debt. A father who's a ticking time bomb. Don't drag him back into the mud with you. Because he doesn't make me feel exhausted." I lied. I chose the cruelest words, cutting him, cutting myself. With him, I don't have to look up. I don't have to feel small. I don't love you anymore, Matthew. I forgot you a long time ago. Matthew gave a hollow, self-mocking laugh. The light in his eyes went out, piece by piece. "All right," he said softly. "Charlotte, you win." He stepped back and cleared a path, his entire presence wrapped in the desolation of someone whose heart had finally died. I didn't dare look at him again. Clutching my coat, I fled down the corridor, escaping that suffocating space as fast as I could. A book once said, "When you're young, loving anything is never wrong. When you're mature, giving something up is never a mistake." Matthew was my first heartbeat of love, the only light in a dark adolescence. It wasn't so much a breakup as it was an escape. The reason was simple. Right person. Wrong time. After high school graduation, Matthew went to Boston for an Ivy League school. I stayed behind, attending a local state university while juggling 3 part-time jobs. Freshman year, we started a long-distance relationship. Despite the time difference, despite how busy he was, he tried, always, to keep us together. He shared his life with me constantly over FaceTime. Lottie, we went to Quincy Market today, the lobster rolls are insane. When you visit, I'll take you there. Lottie, look, this is the sunset over the Charles River. Isn't it just as round as the moon where you are? Lottie, when I get paid from my internship, I'm taking you shopping on Fifth Avenue. I'll buy every bag in that window. His voice always sounded so close. And yet, somehow, farther away every day. Back then, most of my time was spent either buried in books at the library or carrying plates in a restaurant. To save money, I chased every free pizza event at the student center. To make rent, I worked late shifts and didn't fall asleep until 2 in the morning. We were in the same country, yet living in 2 completely different worlds. I thought we would keep moving like that, parallel, occasionally intersecting. Until Valentine's Day my sophomore year. Matthew suddenly appeared downstairs at my dorm, clutching a huge bouquet of red roses, the tip of his nose red from the cold. Surprised? I skipped 2 classes and flew back. Lottie, I missed you. That night, he booked the best hotel downtown. That was the first time we crossed that line. His hands were trembling with nerves. Over and over, he asked, Charlotte, is this okay? Are you scared? I held him and whispered into his ear, Matthew, I love you. It was the most precious thing I had, and I was willing to give it to him. Afterward, he held me close, his fingers twining through my hair, swearing earnestly. Charlotte, when I graduate, I'll tell my family. We'll get married. We'll have 2 kids. A dog. A cat. I'll give you a home. A home where no one can ever bully you again. Those promises were so beautiful that, for a while, they made me forget the pull of reality. He knew how tight money was for me, so he was always finding ways to help. He'd load money onto my meal card, saying he redeemed it with credit card points. He bought me a thick down jacket, claiming it was a free sample from the brand. When my 4-year-old phone finally died, he sent me the latest iPhone without hesitation, saying he'd won it in a raffle. I knew he was protecting my pride. I was like a greedy parasite, feeding on his love and his resources, unable to give him anything truly equal in return. That winter, fate finally came for me. My grandmother slipped and fell in the bathroom. For the elderly, a fractured hip is often a death sentence. The ambulance rushed her to the nearest hospital. What followed were bills that felt like death warrants. Because she didn't have expensive private insurance and relied only on limited Medicare, many treatments weren't covered. Surgery. Anesthesia. Weeks at a skilled nursing facility. The doctor said, if we want her to walk again, she'll need an imported artificial joint. That part is out of pocket. Without it, she might be bedridden for life, and eventually die from complications. The number was $15,000. For Matthew, it might have been the cost of a few parties. For me, it was an unclimbable mountain. Lying in the hospital bed, my grandmother held my hand and said, Sweetheart, don't do it. I've lived long enough. Take me home and let me rest. I looked at her pale face twisted in pain, my heart bleeding. She was the only person in the world who truly loved me. If I lost her too, I would really be an orphan. I contacted every student loan office I could find. I even considered dropping out to work full-time. A girl I used to wait tables with, Jenny, told me there was a faster way to make money. She worked as a bottle girl at a high-end gentleman's club. Charlotte, you're so pretty. If you loosen up a bit, just drink with clients, you can make $1,000 or $2,000 in tips a night. If you're willing to go further, $10,000 isn't impossible. I stood outside that neon-lit club for a long time. In the end, I ran. I couldn't do it. I was afraid of how Matthew would look at me if he ever found out. With nowhere left to turn, I finally called Matthew. It was the hardest phone call I have ever made in my life. "Matthew, could you lend me some money?" My voice shook. "My grandmother is sick. I'll pay you back. I can write an IOU. I'll pay interest." In that moment, every last shred of my pride shattered on the floor. Matthew didn't even ask how much. He cut me off immediately. "Give me the account number." "Charlotte, I'm your boyfriend. What's mine is yours. Don't cry. I'm here." 5 minutes later, $20,000 appeared in my account. That night, I hid in a hospital stairwell and cried until my chest hurt. I cried for my grandmother's life-saving money. And for the part of my dignity that had died completely. The surgery was a success. Matthew even flew back to visit my grandmother. She looked at him, smiling so wide she could barely close her mouth. "This young man is so handsome," she said. "And he truly cares about you. Sweetheart, you must cherish your blessings." Matthew held her hand and said gently, "Nana, you have to live to 100. You'll still need to help us take care of our kids someday. But real life isn't a fairy tale." Just when we thought everything was finally turning around, complications came anyway. Pulmonary embolism. It happened fast. The doctor said she didn't suffer much. But I fell straight back into despair. Even death is expensive. Funeral home fees. Cremation. The urn. A burial plot. Even doing everything as simply as possible cost several $1,000s. And that $20,000 had already vanished into the hospital's bottomless pit. While I was losing my mind trying to scrape together funeral expenses, Mrs. Thorne contacted me. She asked to meet at a French restaurant downtown. For the sake of dignity, I deliberately carried the birthday gift Matthew had once given me, the Chanel classic flap I'd stared at through a shop window for ages before he bought it for me. The double C logo still gleamed, but on my shoulder it felt heavier than stone. Mrs. Thorne was, as always, elegant and composed. Her voice was gentle, her manner soft, nothing like the vicious rich matriarchs you see on television. And yet, that was precisely what made it hurt more. "Charlotte, I know you've just lost a loved one. This must be incredibly painful," she said. "Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't disturb you at a time like this. But Matthew has skipped too many classes this semester. His advisor emailed me. If he continues flying back and forth so frequently, he may be placed on academic probation." My fingers clenched tightly around the expensive bag, my knuckles turning white. I'm sorry," I said quietly. I dragged him down. "Honey, I don't blame you," she replied gently. "I know you're a good girl. You never asked him to do these things." Her gaze drifted to the Chanel bag resting beside me. It paused there for a fraction of a second, understanding flickering through her eyes. "Matthew bought that for you, didn't he? It suits you very well." Then she continued, still calm, still reasonable. "But Charlotte, love sometimes needs bread to survive. Everything Matthew has now, though it's under his name, is ultimately built on family resources. For you, he's beginning to abandon the life path that was carefully planned for him. And you, aside from depending on him, what can you truly give him in return? You're a smart girl. You understand that some gaps can't be bridged by love alone." She didn't slide a check across the table and tell me to leave her son. That would have been crude. Instead, she laid bare the reality and let me see it for myself. I was Matthew's burden. A weight tied to his ankle. A stumbling block in his future. When I walked out of that restaurant, I made a decision. I turned and stepped into a high-end luxury consignment shop on Madison Avenue. The bag is in excellent condition, and it's a very popular model, the sales associate said, wearing white gloves as she examined it professionally. "We can offer you $4,500 in cash for a buyout." That bag was the most precious gift Matthew had ever given me. It represented the kind of life he wanted to give me. And I sold it. With that $4,500, I paid off the remaining funeral expenses and bought my grandmother a dignified urn. In that moment, I felt as if I hadn't just sold a bag. I had sold our love. After that, Matthew called me countless times. I watched his name light up my phone again, and each time, I hit mute. Eventually, he flew back like a man gone mad. "Charlotte, what's going on with you? Why won't you talk to me? Did my mom say something to you? Don't listen to her." I looked at his anxious face, my heart shredding itself apart. "Matthew, I don't have a home anymore. And I don't want to destroy your future. Matthew, let's break up." "Why?" His eyes were red as he asked. "Because," I pointed at the empty room around us. "You can't give me the life I want. I'm tired of always worrying about the next bill. I want a man who's richer, someone who can let me live well right now." "You're lying," he shouted. "Believe it or not," I said coldly. "You're not my type. You're too immature." He stood downstairs outside my apartment all night. That was the coldest winter Boston had seen in years. Snow nearly buried him alive. I hid behind the curtains, standing with him through the night, crying until I almost passed out. At dawn, his elegant mother sent a driver to take him away. "Goodbye, Matthew. Go fly. Go to the elite world that belongs to you. Don't look back at me, stuck in the mud." After that, I learned how to seal my heart shut. I worked myself to the bone, using busyness to numb everything. People say that if you work hard enough, New York City will reward you. The truth is, it usually just drains every last drop of your blood. For the first 2 years after graduation, I lived in an illegal shared apartment deep in Brooklyn. The room was barely big enough for a twin bed. My window faced the exhaust fan of the restaurant next door. My first job was as a junior copywriter at an ad agency. On Christmas Eve that year, because I refused a client's not-so-subtle hint about taking me back to his hotel after a dinner, the pot-bellied man complained to my boss that I was unprofessional. At 9 that night, my boss slammed a termination letter onto my desk. "Charlotte, this industry requires flexibility. Since you're so principled, don't bother coming in tomorrow." I stood on the streets of Manhattan, clutching a cardboard box filled with my belongings. Snow drifted down from the sky. The streets were packed with people carrying gifts, rushing home for Christmas Eve. I opened Uber to call a car, only to see that because of the holiday and the snowstorm, surge pricing had jumped to 5 times the usual rate. One ride would have cost half a month's rent. I couldn't bring myself to pay it. I stood in the freezing wind for half an hour waiting for a bus, only to realize that due to holiday schedule changes, the last bus had already left. That was the moment adult breakdowns happen, in an instant. I crouched by a roadside planter, buried my face in my knees, and cried like a child who couldn't find her way home. All the lights glowing in those high-rise buildings, none of them belonged to me. "Charlotte?" A tentative voice sounded above my head. I looked up through blurred tears and saw Ethan standing in front of me. He was a college alum I knew, someone I'd met years ago while working part-time in the library. "It really is you. What happened?" He was holding 2 grocery bags, looking at me with genuine concern. "It's nothing. I just missed the last bus," I said quickly, wiping my tears in a panic, mortified at being seen like this. "In weather like this, it's hard to get a ride," he said. "My car's parked right up ahead. It's just a used Honda, but the heater works great. If you don't mind, I can take you home?" He scratched the back of his head awkwardly. His eyes were clear, earnest in a way that felt almost rare. That night, Ethan drove his slightly rattly old Honda across half of New York to take me home. There was old-school jazz playing softly in the car, the warm air making me drowsy. And from that night on, he began appearing in my life more and more often. He was the textbook nice guy. He brought me hot soup when I worked late. He bought painkillers for me during my period. To help me save money, he'd walk with me through Central Park instead of taking me to expensive restaurants. He once said, "Charlotte, I'm a patient person. I can wait until that place in your heart finally opens up." I tried to accept him. After all, he was so gentle, so warm, like a fireplace in winter. Until a year later, when he was accepted into a Quantico Reserve program. A background check was mandatory. His mother, who had once been an elementary school principal, came to see me. She cried as she begged, "Charlotte, Ethan has such a bright future. If he's going to enter the FBI, the backgrounds of his immediate family and partner must be spotless. Your father's felony record, if you marry him, it will ruin his clearance. He loves you so much, he would never blame you. But can you really bear to see his dreams shatter because of you?" I looked at that mother's desperate eyes, and the small flame that had just begun to ignite inside me went out instantly. It was fate. Someone from a family like mine was destined to be a stain, to contaminate anyone clean who stood too close. So I did it again. I told Ethan, "You're boring. I don't like you anymore." Once more, I cut the rope leading to happiness with my own hands. Later, I finally became what others called an independent woman. I learned how to do my makeup. Learned how to deflect drinks at business dinners without making a scene. Learned how to speak one way to people and another way to ghosts. I grew smooth, worldly, socially polished. Sometimes, when I looked in the mirror, the person staring back felt unfamiliar, so unfamiliar it made me uncomfortable. The most relaxing moment of every day was coming home and picking up January, now so old she could no longer jump onto the couch. "Be good," I whispered, rubbing her ears. "Mommy's getting her bonus soon. I'll buy you the most expensive raw food cans." Looking into her cloudy eyes, a wave of sadness washed over me. She was old. And I was 30. I opened my work inbox. An unread email sat there. Position recommendation confirmation, from Frank. The role, Associate Director, Project Division. My phone buzzed. A WhatsApp message from Frank. "Did you get the email? Please reply once received." I typed back a single word, "Received," and his call came in immediately. "Charlotte," he said warmly, "that Associate Director role? I've been holding it for you. You know that. I trained you myself, I know exactly what you're capable of. But," he continued, lowering his voice, "you know how brutal the job market is right now. And this new Mr. Thorne, he's Ivy League. This year's management trainees are all master's grads. You're strong on execution, no doubt. But your degree is still just a state school bachelor's. From the board's perspective, your competitiveness is a bit weaker." The truth was, back then, I could have gone to grad school. If only I'd had the money. "Frank, I'm currently enrolled in an executive MBA. I'll have the degree next year," I replied, keeping my tone strictly professional. I know. "And you know I'm on your side," Frank said. His voice dropped, turning greasy in a way that made my skin crawl. "But some processes, you know, can be made a little more smooth. I hear your husband's been in Europe long term?" "Perfect timing. My wife's taking the kids to Florida this week. Why don't you come over tonight? We can open a bottle of wine and really talk about your career planning. I've got some great bottles tucked away." My stomach churned. The knuckles gripping my phone turned white. So this was the so-called workplace, behind the glass towers and polished lobbies. How many filthy trades like this were quietly happening? "Frank," I said flatly, "if it's business, we can discuss it at the office. If it's personal, I'm not interested." "Charlotte, don't be ungrateful," he snapped. "You're a smart woman. You should know which road is the shortcut. With this restructuring, Mr. Thorne is definitely going to clean house. Without my backing, you think you'll keep your seat? Don't forget how ugly it got when your criminal father came to make a scene last time. If I hadn't covered for you upstairs." For years, Frank had lined his pockets with kickbacks and inflated budgets. The previous boss had turned a blind eye. I never imagined he'd eventually reach for me. Thanks for Director Frank's generosity, I said coldly. I'm not worthy of such a blessing. I hung up, then blocked his private number. The next morning, an internal announcement went out. Our department was forming a special project unit. And the newly appointed project manager was Riley. Riley was my assistant. She'd been with me less than a year. I'd recruited her at a charity job fair. Back then, she'd just graduated, wearing a cheap suit, eyes timid and uncertain, so much like my younger self it hurt. She'd grown up in foster care, buried under student loans. I'd seen myself in her. This past year, I'd taught her everything hand in hand. I'd even lent her money privately to cover the minimum payments on her credit cards. I never expected the fable of the farmer and the snake to play out on me. Riley was in the conference room lecturing a group of interns, dressed in a brand new Dior suit from the current season, fingers tipped with meticulous manicures. When she saw me standing at the door, she stepped out on red-soled heels, a victor's smile on her face. "You said yes to Frank, didn't you?" I asked, staring straight into her eyes. "If you already know, why ask?" She shrugged casually, admiring her fresh nails. "Why?" My chest went cold. "Riley, you're capable. If you'd just worked steadily for 2 years, that position would have been yours anyway. Why take a path this dirty? 2 years?" She let out a soft laugh, eyes full of mockery. "Charlotte, it took you 8 years to crawl up to manager. Me? 1 night. I need money. I don't want to end up like you, 30 years old, still paying a mortgage, still dragged down by your family. If you needed money, you could have told me." "Told you?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "How long could you help me? Pay off all my loans? Buy me a Hermes?" "Charlotte, stop pretending you're a saint. I'm not pure." "And you are?" "I ran into one of your college classmates recently," she continued, her voice turning vicious. "She said your private life back then was a mess. That you even had an abortion for that ex of yours." My mind went blank. It was like an invisible hand closed around my heart, crushing it. The pain from years ago came crawling back along my nerves, sharp and merciless. "See?" She smiled cruelly, eyes glittering with the pleasure of tearing an idol off her pedestal. "You act so high and mighty, but deep down, aren't you rotten too?" I took a deep breath and forced myself to calm down. I looked at her coldly, my voice frighteningly steady. "Riley, remember what you said today. Yes, beauty and youth are assets. But if those are the only cards you have, it's a dead hand. You know exactly what kind of man Frank is. Once he's done playing, he'll throw you away like trash. Since you've chosen the shortcut, then I sincerely wish you a pleasant stay in the abyss." With that, I turned around and walked away without looking back. In that moment, I was completely done with this company, with this cursed workplace. I went back to my office and started packing. The place I'd fought for 8 years came down to a cardboard box, a cactus, a few books, and a mug I'd been using forever. After work, I ran into Mrs. Thorne at the cafe downstairs. She seemed to be waiting for me. Years had passed, yet time appeared to have forgotten her. She still looked like a wealthy woman in her early 30s. "Charlotte, it's been a long time. You've changed a lot." "You haven't changed much," I replied evenly. "You've become more beautiful. And more capable," she said with a gentle smile, one that no longer made me feel small. "Matthew has changed a lot too. But there are things about him that never changed." She stirred her coffee and sighed. "These past years, he's worked himself relentlessly, studying, building wealth. He didn't just take over the family business, he started his own venture fund. Everything was moving in the right direction. A while ago, I urged him. I said, 'You're nearly 30, it's time to settle down.' I told him to choose a suitable girl from our circle. He told me, 'Mom, this time I'll choose for myself.' Everything was fine, until he lost his composure again because of you. All of Matthew's rebellions over the years, you are their source. I heard your father caused trouble at the company a few days ago. Matthew paid him $50,000 to make him sign a non-prosecution agreement and a restraining order. Charlotte, as a mother, can you understand how I feel? This time, I didn't lower my head like I had at 18. I straightened my back and met her gaze. I'm sorry, Mrs. Thorne. I can't understand. I grew up without a mother, I can't empathize with maternal love. But I've never blamed you. When I was 16, your smile reminded me that kindness still existed in this world. When I was 18, you told me I shouldn't become his stumbling block. It was cruel, but it was true. But I'm not 18 anymore. I'm not 22 either. I'm 30-year-old Charlotte Green. You don't need to handle me like fragile glass or protect my pride with euphemisms. I understand what you mean. Rest assured, I won't ruin him. The money from back then, and the money he used to cover my father this time, I'll repay Matthew in full, with interest. I have some savings. The person I least want to owe in this life, is him. With that, I picked up my bag and walked out of the cafe calmly. This time, I wasn't running away. Back at the company reception desk, the young receptionist stopped me. Charlotte, there's a delivery for you, same-day express, I think. I opened the beautifully wrapped box. Inside lay a pair of Jimmy Choo crystal heels. The crystals shimmered under the lights, dreamlike, almost unreal. I remembered being 18, when Matthew had given me those Nike sneakers. He'd said, Lottie, one day I'll buy you real crystal shoes. Cinderella becomes a princess when she puts on the glass slippers. I gave a bitter smile. I had already worn my crystal shoes at 18. But the clock had struck midnight long ago. The princess still had to turn back into Cinderella. I took out the resignation letter I'd written long before and placed it on the counter, together with the crystal heels. Please give these to Mr. Thorne when he arrives. Charlotte, are you really leaving? The receptionist burst out angrily. Is it because of that bitch Riley? She's spreading rumors everywhere, everyone knows she's the type who'll do anything to climb up. Don't take it to heart. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. No, I said softly. I'm just tired. I want to rest for a while. I didn't drive. I just wanted to walk. Whenever I felt overwhelmed, I used to walk Manhattan aimlessly, watching the crowds surge past, the yellow taxis flowing like a river, the neon lights that never slept. In a city this big, everyone is as small as an ant. And somehow, that smallness made me feel safe. I passed the giant screens in Times Square. A Valentine's Day slogan scrolled across them. Love is brave. Love is now. Heh. Matthew, then I wish you happiness. I don't want your blessing, a voice said suddenly behind me. And I don't want to wish you happiness either. I spun around. He was standing there in the cold wind, dressed in a long black coat, his expression so complicated I couldn't read it. Charlotte, he said, stepping closer, his voice trembling. You can calculate money down to the last cent. But what about what we meant to each other? You'd rather sell your dignity to strangers than lower your head to me, even once? I stared at him, frozen. The wind whipped the hem of his coat violently. Matthew, in the end, I was never worthy of your love. Not worthy? He let out a cold laugh, then asked a question that froze my soul solid. Charlotte, back in sophomore year, were you pregnant? It felt like lightning struck me. My blood ran backward in my veins. You, how do you know? What Riley said, I didn't believe, he said hoarsely. But I checked your medical records. He stared at me, eyes red. Why? Why did you end it? Because it was my child, was that why you hated it so much? No, that's not it. I broke. Every wall I had built collapsed in that instant. That was my punishment, I sobbed. Poverty punishing me. My fists clenched, nails digging deep into my palms as I cried out. I don't even know why I got pregnant, we used protection every time. I looked up the cost of an abortion. At Planned Parenthood it was $500. Add the nutrition after, I couldn't afford any of it. I was still paying back the money you lent for my grandma's surgery. I could barely afford food. How was I supposed to raise a child? I made the appointment, but that night, I dreamed the baby was crying. He asked me, "Mom, why don't you want me?" The next day, I started having stomach pain. The doctor said it was a chemical pregnancy, a natural miscarriage. It was because I was exhausted, malnourished. My body simply couldn't carry a life. Standing there in the freezing wind, I poured out every secret I had let rot inside me. Matthew, I didn't abort him. He left on his own, because he thought I wasn't worthy of being a mother. He cost me only a few dozen dollars in exam fees. Even when he left, he was saving me money. The night Matthew stood outside my apartment all night in the snow was the same night I lay curled up in my dorm bed, clutching my stomach, bleeding, in agony. He begged me to come back in the freezing dark. I sent our child away under the covers. My body was bleeding. My heart was bleeding. Oh God. Lottie. Matthew rushed forward and crushed me into his arms, holding me so tightly it felt like he wanted to fuse me into his bones. This isn't your fault. It's mine. All of it is my fault. I'm a bastard. How could I be so stupid? I knew you so well, how did I not see that you were suffering? I found out later, that your grandma passed away. That you carried everything alone. He buried his face in the crook of my neck. His tears were scorching, soaking through my scarf. This man, so ruthless and decisive in the business world, was crying like a helpless child in my arms. I'm sorry, Matthew. I sold the Chanel bag. The one you gave me. To hell with the bag. His voice broke as he cupped my face, his fingers trembling while he wiped away my tears. His eyes were filled with the terror of almost losing me, and the wild relief of finding me again. None of that matters, Charlotte. Do you know how easy I've always been? He said hoarsely. All you ever had to do was call my name. I've been standing on the shore this whole time. Waiting for you to grow wings. Waiting for you to stop being afraid. Waiting for you to run back to me. My number never changed. My WhatsApp photo never changed. I thought you'd come looking for me. And then I couldn't take it anymore. I figured, if you wouldn't come, I'd come get you. In the winter of 2017, I came back. Christmas Eve. I saw a man kneeling by the curb tying your shoelaces. He drove a beat-up car and took you home. You smiled at him so gently. I was insanely jealous. I thought you'd fallen in love with someone else. That you'd really forgotten me. I ran back to Boston like a coward. I saw you on a live stream later, planning an event. White shirt, ponytail, calm and confident. That was when I decided to gamble. If I didn't come back, I would lose you for good. He pressed his forehead to mine, his voice so soft it nearly melted. Charlotte, let's not miss each other again, okay? Let's be brave for each other, just once more. I looked at his face, so close I could see myself reflected in his eyes. Me, scarred, exhausted, barely holding together. I gathered the flood of emotions back into myself. Silence stretched. Reason slowly returned. I had debts I couldn't finish paying. A father who could explode at any moment. A body worn down, a mind full of shadows. And he, limitless prospects, a powerful family, a wide-open future. I couldn't drag him back into my mud again. Love, sometimes, is restraint. I gently pushed him away and whispered, Matthew, let it go. You don't love me anymore? He stared at me, disbelief cracking his voice. I love you so much, I said softly. But I can't ruin you. In the adult world, love is a luxury. We're not 18 anymore. All those reckless urges we know we shouldn't act on, eventually they all collapse into 3 words, let it go. Matthew, thank you for being part of my life. I won't hold you back anymore. Then I turned and ran into the subway station, leaving the man who loved me behind in the wind, again. This time, it might truly be forever. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. The screen filled with threats from Joe Green. Even after I blocked him, he switched numbers and kept going. You think 50 grand buys my silence? Your rich ex drives a Rolls-Royce. I want $500,000. If you don't pay, I'll go to the media. Heartless executive abandons ex-con father, that'll trend in no time. I stared numbly at the words, feeling all the strength drain out of my body. The wounds of my family were like a parasite in the bone. No matter how fast I ran or how cleanly I cut, they always flared back at the worst possible moment. I dragged myself home and opened the door. January. Mommy's back. Normally, my little white cat would already be waiting by the door, limping over to rub against my legs. But tonight, the apartment was deathly silent. A bad feeling surged in my chest. I dropped my bag and ran to the balcony. January was curled up in her bed, as if asleep. I reached out to touch her. And felt only cold, rigid stillness. January? Don't scare Mommy, please. I held that small, stiff body in my arms and let out a wail of despair in this hollow city. She was the last family I had left in this world. And now she was gone too. I'm going to wander alone now. In that moment, the taut string I'd held tight for 8 years finally snapped. Dizziness from a high fever crashed over me. Only then did I remember, I'd been burning with fever for 3 days, surviving on nothing but ibuprofen. Add years of malnutrition, exhaustion, and the emotional shock of tonight. I tried to stand and get a glass of water. The world suddenly spun. Darkness surged like a tide and swallowed me whole. In the final second before I lost consciousness, I thought I heard someone pounding frantically on the door, shouting my name. Charlotte. Lottie. Open up. Bonus chapter, Matthew's monologue. A reporter once asked me, during a Forbes 30 Under 30 interview, what kind of woman I liked. Without thinking, I answered, a bob haircut. Big eyes. The reporter laughed. So Mr. Thorne likes a vintage look. I smiled politely. The truth is, I don't like short hair or big eyes. I just like her. The first time I met Charlotte, I was still a kid myself. She was tiny and thin, wrapped in an oversized hoodie, looking like a startled fawn. She said thank you so softly it almost disappeared into the air. Shit. That was the moment I knew, I was done for. I wanted to protect her. Like an idiot, I tore open my brand new sneaker boxes and unopened game consoles just to give her a few more cardboard boxes she could sell. Whatever. If my mom yelled at me, so be it. Later, just to get closer to her, I begged my family to let me transfer to that public high school. I deliberately chose the seat next to hers. She kept her head down, terrified I might recognize her. So I pretended I'd never seen her at her worst. I knew her life was hard. I just didn't know it was that hard. Seeing that proud girl humiliated by a gym teacher because her shoes were falling apart, I wanted to buy the entire gym and fire that bastard on the spot. On her birthday, I photoshopped a fake receipt and badgered her until she accepted those sneakers. Watching her wear the same pair as mine, I was secretly happy for a whole week. I knew pride was everything to her. So when she was publicly forced into a donation drive over a few $100s of graduation fees, I lost my mind. I stood up for her. Only later did I find out she'd gone to work in a toxic factory just to pay me back. Did she really want to draw a line between us that badly? Everyone said I was destroying my future by giving up the Ivy League for her. Only I knew the truth. She was the one who pushed me forward. She said, Matthew, go see the world for me. All right. If that was Lottie's wish, I'd go. I was young. I could wait. Those 2 years in Boston were the happiest of my life. I wanted to hold her in my palms. I wanted to be her sunny day. I sang Sunny Day for her. I watched her smile at me from the audience and thought, this is forever. But forever was too short. The day we broke up, she refused to see me while I stood in the snow all night. I thought she'd changed. I thought she wanted more security than I could give. For 8 years, I forced myself to grow up like a madman. I took over the family business. I fought on Wall Street. I turned myself into a cold capitalist. I thought, once I'm strong enough, I'll go back and take her with me. Even if she was married, I'd still take her back. The moment I returned, I saw her shining in the workplace. But I also saw the exhaustion in her eyes. The slap she took in that bar didn't hurt me. What hurt was her pain. When she cried in the cold wind and told me the truth about the miscarriage, it felt like someone was carving my heart out with a knife. My Charlotte had survived hell alone, in a corner I never saw. And I had still been acting like a child, testing her, provoking her. I deserved to rot. When she said let it go and ran away, I panicked completely. I texted, no reply. I called, no answer. In the end, I ran straight to her apartment. No response. No matter how hard I knocked or shouted. A fear I had never known seized me. I broke the door open. She was collapsed by the balcony, holding her dead cat. Her face was paper white. Her body burning with fever. My world nearly ended right there. Charlotte. Don't sleep. Look at me. Please, don't leave me. I want you to know. You were never my calculation. You were the joy of my youth. You were the conviction I chose even knowing the cost. The doctor said you were too tired. That you had no desire to wake up. But the wedding flowers are already ordered. Do you want to wake up and see them? I'll play the piano again. I'll sing for you. Or, how about I sing right now? You can tell me whether my voice sounds worse than it did at 18. After all, I'm 30 now. Final chapter, after the rain. I had a very long dream. In it, rain kept falling, cold, biting, endless. Until a pair of hands clasped mine tightly, passing warmth into me without stopping. Somewhere near my ear, someone seemed to be singing, his voice hoarse beyond recognition. Once upon a time there was someone who loved you for so long. But the wind and the rain slowly blew the distance far away. I forced my heavy eyelids open. Harsh white light. The sharp smell of disinfectant. A VIP hospital room. The man slumped beside my bed jerked his head up. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw covered in dark stubble. Charlotte? You're awake? Doctor. Doctor. Matthew fumbled for the call button, his hands shaking, words tumbling over each other. In that moment, seeing how wrecked he looked, the last block of ice around my heart suddenly melted. After the examination, the doctor said it was severe exhaustion combined with viral influenza, which had triggered myocarditis. If I'd arrived any later, the consequences would have been unthinkable. When the room finally quieted down and only the two of us remained, Mrs. Thorne came in. She was carrying a thermal container, her expression tinged with guilt. Charlotte, I made this chicken soup myself, she said softly. It probably can't compare to a Michelin chef's. She sat down by the bed and sighed gently. I'm sorry. Matthew told me everything. I didn't know about your grandmother back then. I didn't know how much you were carrying on your own. I was arrogant. I measured your dignity through my own prejudice. Can you forgive me? I shook my head, my eyes burning. Auntie, it's all in the past. Just then, my phone vibrated. It was a voice message from a former intern in my department. Charlotte. Justice served. That Riley got fired. Apparently Matthew personally uncovered that she'd been leaking company secrets to a competitor for money. Not only was she fired, she's facing charges. She was crying and begging in the office, and security dragged her straight out. And Frank, he's been taken in by the police. Embezzlement, sexual harassment of multiple female employees. It's all under investigation now. Matthew finished peeling an apple, cut it into small pieces, and held one to my lips. His tone was calm, as if he were commenting on the weather. As for Joe Green, my legal team found evidence that he was involved in illegal gambling during parole. Solid proof. His parole has been revoked. This time, he'll stay inside until the end of his life. No one will ever bother you again. I looked at the man in front of me. He was no longer the boy who only knew how to give me sneakers. He had cleared every obstacle in his own way, handing me a world that was finally clean and quiet. "Lottie," Matthew said, setting the apple down and taking my hand. His gaze was deep and unwavering. "You have no job now. No troublesome father. You have nothing left, and nothing left to fear. Does that bet still count?" What bet? My voice was still weak. "You said you didn't love me anymore." He pulled out the plain band ring I had thrown away, and the diamond ring that belonged to him, one he must have bought long ago. "But I'm a very stubborn man," he said quietly. "I want to spend the rest of my life gambling with you. I'm betting that you'll fall in love with me again. That we can make up for all the years we lost. That you'll become the best wedding planner there is, and that your very first client will be us." I looked at him as silent tears slid down my face. The boy who once held an umbrella for me in the rain had finally, after all the storms, caught me as I fell, broken, but still here. "Matthew." "Yeah?" January is gone." "I know," he said softly. "I had my assistant bury her at a pet cemetery on Long Island. There's sunshine there. Grass. She won't be lonely. We'll adopt another one someday. Or, if you want, a dog. I still owe you a lot of money." "Then pay me back with your body," he said without missing a beat. "A lifetime will do." I burst out laughing through my tears. Outside the window, the rain had stopped. Sunlight filtered through the blinds and spilled across the hospital bed, warm and gentle. The Charlotte who had kept herself locked in the dark for so long finally pushed the door open, because she knew her sunshine was standing right outside. "Matthew. I'm here. I love you too. I always have." That day in the hospital room, Matthew held me like a priceless treasure he'd almost lost forever. He stroked my back over and over, soothing me the way you calm a frightened cat. "Lottie," he whispered, "you take one step forward. I'll walk the other 99. Say it with me, Lottie will be okay." Choking up, like a child learning to speak, I repeated, "Lottie, will be okay." "Now say this," he coaxed gently. "Lottie will never be separated from Matthew again." The tears finally broke free. I buried my face in his chest and answered with everything I had. "Never again." That moment, we kissed amid the scent of disinfectant. I didn't think about the future. I didn't think about class or status. I only knew this. The boy who had trapped my entire youth had finally caught me. And since he was still willing to wait for me, how could I not be brave one more time? Matthew said, "Let's pretend this year is our first meeting. Let's fall in love again, with who we are now." So at 30, we dated like we were 18. We shed our dull office clothes and pulled on matching oversized hoodies and sneakers. In the mirror, I saw myself in a hoodie with a ponytail, and Matthew beside me, grinning like a high school quarterback who just scored a touchdown. It felt like time had reversed. Back then, every meeting came with a countdown. Every airport goodbye left me sobbing. Now, we could finally waste time without guilt. We queued for flowers like ordinary couples, watched old movies at an outdoor cinema in Brooklyn, lay in the grass of Central Park soaking up the sun. We rented a Wrangler and drove west along Route 66, from the bustle of Chicago to Arizona's Red Rocks, all the way to California's Highway 1. We kissed beneath the stars at the Grand Canyon. We made wishes under the neon lights of Las Vegas. At sunset on Santa Monica Beach, I asked him, "Do you still have any wishes?" He turned toward me. The sea breeze tousled his blonde hair, his gaze deeper than the ocean. "No," he said. "Everything I want is already right here." That's when I understood, some people win the whole world just by standing there. It was a Coldplay concert. Matthew waved 2 floor tickets with a smug smile. Lottie, remember that song we used to play in the car, Yellow? I told you I'd bring you to the live show one day. Years later, when Look at the Stars, Look How They Shine for You filled the stadium, the crowd erupted. Surrounded by a sea of glow sticks, Matthew and I screamed the lyrics together until our voices gave out. All the bitterness, regret, and unspoken longing of youth poured out with the music. When the line "For you I'd bleed myself dry" rang out, Matthew suddenly turned to me. Amid tens of thousands of cheers and a storm of confetti, he dropped to one knee. The crowd instinctively parted into a circle. Someone screamed. His eyes were full of starlight as he held up a pink diamond ring and shouted, "Lottie! I'm never losing you again. Marry me." With people chanting "Say yes," I nodded through tears. He stood and kissed me like he was making up for every kiss we'd missed. The big screen caught the moment, our embrace frozen above the stadium. In that instant, I was the happiest woman in New York. On quiet weekends, our favorite thing is grocery shopping. Pushing a cart, debating steak or pasta for dinner, these ordinary, smoky little moments of life make me feel unbelievably grounded. After everything, it turns out this is what forever looks like. As we passed the personal care aisle, Matthew casually grabbed several brightly colored boxes of condoms and tossed them into the cart, smooth, practiced, clearly proud of his advanced planning. My face instantly burned. I instinctively glanced around to see if anyone was watching. And, against my will, my mind flashed back to that wild night years ago, the way he'd been like a tireless perpetual motion machine. These boxes. What are you thinking about? Matthew leaned in, grinning as he murmured against my ear. Why's your face so red, reliving memories? Why, you bought way too many, I protested under my breath. Too many? He raised a brow. Lottie, are you seriously underestimating the inventory your husband's been saving up for 8 years? The moment we got back to the apartment, the door barely closed before the grocery bags were tossed aside. He pressed me hard against the door, kissing me, rough, urgent, hungry. Clothes scattered across the floor. In the dim light of the entryway, his eyes gleamed like a wolf that had been starved far too long. You've gotten thinner, he breathed, his hand gripping my waist. But the places that matter? A low laugh. Not a single inch missing. I tried to glare at him in embarrassment, but the next wave of his assault shattered what little rational thought I had left. One thing was proven beyond doubt: never underestimate the explosive power of a 30-year-old man who's been celibate for years. Back when we were long distance, I thought he was just clingy. Now? Matthew had skin hunger practically stamped on his forehead. Whenever we were home, he stuck to me like a human accessory, no trace left of that aloof Wall Street elite persona. Even Clara couldn't help commenting. Wow. He's a lost cause. Matthew didn't even get mad. Peeling an orange for me, he shot back coolly, still better than someone else's situation. A 35-year-old man who needs his ex-girlfriend's help just to work up the nerve to chase his wife. Jax is not old. Clara exploded. That's mature man charm. Speaking of Clara and Jax, she'd originally agreed to the business engagement with Matthew just to spite Jax. And Matthew had gone along with it to provoke me. Now everything had settled back where it belonged. Clara had finally conquered her prideful, hard-headed biker tough guy. Honestly, I owed Jax one. Matthew had tried to make my father disappear by throwing money at the problem, but a gambler's greed has no bottom. Joe took the money and still tried to harass me. But Jax? Jax was forged on the streets. I heard he sent a few of his guys to have some friendly talks with Joe. No violence. Just constant surveillance, 24 hours a day. Even when Joe slept, someone would be smiling at him through the window. After a few rounds of that, Joe completely broke down and finally behaved himself. The shadow that had haunted my life for so long was finally, completely gone. On our wedding day, Matthew didn't invite his parents. Beforehand, he'd made his stance clear to them. If you can't genuinely accept Lottie, I won't let her spend my wedding day trying to please anyone. She's lived her life straight and upright, worked harder than anyone I know. If I'd grown up in her circumstances, I'm not sure I'd have turned out half as well. If anyone's unworthy here, it's me. Everything I've pushed myself to become, she's been my reason. If I'm 30 years old and still can't protect the woman I love, then I don't deserve to call myself a man. The wedding venue was a sea of white camellias. In our second year of marriage, I got pregnant by accident. We hadn't planned on having a baby so soon. My past miscarriage had left me with serious PTSD. I lived in constant fear. Matthew even moved his office home, obsessively researching prenatal nutrition every day. But the first few months were brutal. Morning sickness hit hard. I couldn't keep anything down and lost a frightening amount of weight. Matthew watched helplessly, heartbroken. Then Mrs. Thorne heard about it and showed up at our door with a thermos, knocking carefully. Truthfully, I never hated her. I understood her calculations. She'd been protecting her son's future. And years ago, in that mansion's backyard, she'd once given me the warmest encouragement I'd ever known. She bustled around the kitchen, laying out dish after dish. Matthew frowned. "Mom, isn't this too greasy?" "She throws up everything." "You don't understand," Mrs. Thorne dismissed him. "This soup is specially balanced. Very appetizing. Lottie, try it." It was sour and spicy, surprisingly perfect. I drank 2 full bowls. "Thank you, Mrs. Thorne," I said politely. Her eyes instantly reddened. "My child, why are you still calling me Mrs. Thorne?" She pulled a thick envelope from her Hermes bag and pressed it into my hands. "This is a trust fund for the baby. And something for you. We're family now." In the later months, my feet swelled badly. Once, Mrs. Thorne took me shoe shopping. She helped me sit down, then actually crouched in front of me, personally trying on shoes and tying the laces. Pressing on the toe, she looked up gently. "Lottie, does it pinch?" In that moment, the noise of the mall faded away. I was suddenly 18 again, the poor girl staring at shoes through a window, the girl who used to envy other daughters as their mothers bent down to tie their laces. The tears came without warning. "Mom, thank you. So this is what it feels like, to have a mother." A month before my due date, we passed a pet shop. Through the glass, I saw a white kitten with blue eyes, so much like January. Matthew asked, "Do you want to take her home?" I shook my head, smiling as I touched my belly. "No. We're about to have a little demon at home." Not long after, our baby was born. A girl. My eyes and brows. Matthew's nose and mouth. She was born in January, so we named her Jan. To honor the cat who stayed with me through my darkest days. And to mark the rebirth of Matthew and me. Looking at our sleeping daughter in her crib, and at Matthew beside me, fumbling clumsily with a diaper, I felt the missing piece of my heart finally click into place. "Matthew, thank you. I finally have a home again." The end.